All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernard Canna. I am the editor, photographer, owner of the website known as the Dice Knights. We are here with a very special interview today, which I was very happy to be able to schedule and get acquired. We have with us on our call today Peter Adkison, who is the creator of a very new series that's coming out starting on December the 20th, which we'll talk about through today. Also owner of Gen Con, who also used to work for Wizards of the Coast. Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I am great and great. First of all, thank you for
Good.
taking the time today. I greatly appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be able to get a chance to talk to you and
My
anyone
pleasure.
else that want to, especially with this new endeavor that you have going. I was very excited to hear this news. So for those who don't know or haven't seen, Peter is starting up a new YouTube series that is based on that's known as the World of Chaldea. And Peter, I'll let you kind of talk about where did this idea come from and what prompted you to start this now?
Well, Chaldea is my old Dungeons and Dragons role-playing campaign going clear back to the early 1980s. Started off as my D&D world, and which I've played in for. So I guess I could say it's been under development for 40 years. But it was about 7 years ago that in 2013 that me and my creative and business partner Steve Connard decided, hey, we should try and tell a story set in this world. We should try and publish this world in a way, but not the traditional way of coming out with an RPG campaign setting. Let's just tell a story that's set in Chaldea. So we started working on that in earnest in 2013.
Very cool. So from what I've seen, if I was reading, it's like, so back from 2013 to now, here we are 6-7 years in the making. There was, I mean, as you said, there's a bunch of different ways you could have released this, but you decided on doing this in a very unique way through YouTube. And I guess I want to call it almost like moving pictures. Would that be an accurate description?
Yep. So it's a multimedia sort of approach. Most of our story is told in motion graphics.
Okay.
And what that means is it's comic book style art that we with a lot of separate layers so that we can kind of parallax pictures around a little bit, but with voiceover from actors. So all the lines in the story are performed by actors in a studio, and with an original musical score and sound effects and stuff. So that is how 98% or so of the story is told. And then once in a while we have a straight up, live action segment, just like a movie segment that will be maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes long. Kind of like if you're playing a video game, some video games, and once in a while it cuts to a short movie, a cutscene, right? So similar thing, only instead of a video game, it's comic book style art telling a story, and it's
Very
fantasy. Cool. It's very epic. It's violent. It's sexy. It's just good, fun fantasy.
That sounds fun. So you're the actors who are doing your voices are also playing these roles in the live piece as well?
Yes, that's exactly right. Of course, in the motion graphics, there's a lot more characters, but there's a subset of those characters, which are the main characters that are the protagonists of the story. We have, at the beginning, we have 5 what we call point of view characters or lead characters. There'll be more introduced as the series goes on. And kind of like how Game of Thrones jumps around between, Sansa and Tyrion and Daenerys and stuff like that. Similarly, we have a cast of lead characters that each have their own story with their own supporting cast. And of course, these stories are going to ultimately be connected in some way. But yeah, it's the same actors. So when you watch, if you've seen Sarva, say, as a comic book character, and then you see her in live action, it's the same, the actor that performed Sarva in live action, Yasmin Aker, her likeness is used in all the comic book art. So
That's cool.
It's an easy transition to make. The characters, even their armor, what they're wearing, everything, we cast the characters first, the actors first, got their images, got the rights to use their images, and dress them up.
Awesome.
And so, okay, now we know what you look like, what you're going to look like in film. Now we take a lot of reference photos of that, use it for the comic book imagery.
That's very cool. I like that. Good idea to be able to do it that way. So you're seeing the real likeness transform from from live to comic as opposed to yeah, we're just take our best guess at stabbing to see what this person looks like and how they
Yeah.
go out. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. The key is matching the art to the photography, you know, or the cinematography. You can't go the other way around. You know,
No.
if you create a piece of art and then try to match it cinematography, then you're not going to be able to do that.
Yep. Makes sense. Makes sense. So you did talk about Starver. Let's kind of briefly touch about. So I did have my list of characters that you have here. There are 5 that you at least touched upon that's going to happen through the series to start. The first one was Giannis. Is that the way it's pronounced? Yonnus?
Yeah, Jonas Octani. He is your classic. Can I use D&D terms here? You know,
Absolutely. Feel free.
Yeah. If you imagine sort of your roguish character, kind of a tough roguish character, a fighter thief maybe, grew up on the streets, tough life, but has a good heart. So he's probably our most morally conflicted character because of a dark background, a victim of domestic violence as a child, living on the streets, all this stuff like that. But he's our central protagonist. Out of all these lead characters, he's the character that we primarily envelop the story around.
Okay. And then we talked about, then you had Sarva, and who is she in this story?
So Sarva is a Middle Eastern character. I'm a big fan of history. I love having a multi-ethnic. You know, this is a world. It's a Chaldea world, so there's lots of ethnic cultures, and so her culture is ultimately inspired by Babylon, say Neo-Babylon, and it was in our version of Babylon. We took a lot of liberty. We made it a female-dominated society, and so she comes from, and she is the rightful heir to the throne of we call it Acadia, and but she is held by her nemesis, and she tries to take it and fails, and then gets exiled, and so she's out running around with a bunch of white dudes, but she's from a female-dominated society, and now she's in a male-dominated society. So there's a lot of tension between her and some of the other characters.
And I'm assuming, especially because she's also royalty too, that plays a part in her trying to deal with this very different world for her.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yes, she is.
All right. Then you have Zane.
Yes, Zane Adrelistos is an elf character, a male elf character. He starts off our story as very irresponsible. He's been at Bard school for like decades, you know, a perpetual student, a partier, taking advantage of all the advantages of being a handsome male elf. And then when the emperor is assassinated and all hell breaks loose, Zane has to grow up in a hurry.
All right. Then it's Maruko.
Yes, Marco Hamilgrar. So Marco Hamilgrar is kind of our version of a Bilbo Baggins. He's a halfling character, and he's also the narrator of Chaldea. So it's his voice that you'll hear more than any others.
Okay.
Because he is telling the story of Chaldea from the future. You know, he's writing about it just like Bilbo wrote Here and Back Again. But he's also in the story, just like Bilbo's in his own story. So it's a familiar model there, and played by Eric Ray Anderson, who's got a great voice. So he has his own story, but he's also narrating all the other stories. And I should quickly mention Sarva is played by Yasmin Aker, and Jonas Octani is played by Brandon Marino.
Okay. And then the last one, I'm sure I'll butcher this one. Is it Reiswitz?
Oh, you got it pretty good. Reiswitz, you know, it's kind of debatable as to whether you want to take that German W and make it more of a V.
That's how I looked at it.
Kind of blur the line a little bit. So Reiswitz is, well, actually, our story kind of started with him. The first film we made had him, and he is an homage. I grew up in wargaming. I don't know if you knew that, Bernard, but I'm old enough that Dungeons and Dragons hadn't been invented yet, and I started off in wargaming. And so this character, I learned a lot of the roots of the real world Reiswitz in the late 1700s, early 1800s. The guy who's generally credited as the father of wargaming, because he made the mental leap of going from chessboard grid systems to having a diorama with sand and miniatures that can move freely and measuring distances with a measuring tape. And I said, I was so moved by this story, I created an homage essentially to this guy. So within Chaldea, cool. I have one of our protagonists is named Reiswitz, and Reiswitz is a wargamer. He invented wargaming within Chaldea. And he's a military man. He's the legatus of an imperial legion, and story goes from there.
All right, that's very
And
cool.
he's played by Stefan Hyatt.
Okay. Now, the one thing I did, or I remember, if I'm trying to my brain correctly, Giannis was based on someone very, I guess, more dear to you in the story for the campaign that you've had. Did you want to tell a little
Yes.
bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So back when we started playing D&D in the 80s, one of the players that was most beloved in Chaldea history was a guy named Cliff Jones, CJ. And he was just one of these people that everybody loved him, everybody loved his characters. You couldn't find anybody that didn't have a lot of great words to say about CJ. And he passed away a number of years ago, and uh, he is still missed daily. And this was his character in my D&D campaign. He just called the character Yo. It means like my character's Yo, you know. and so we're like, okay, since we're a couple of white guys, I don't know if we want to have a character named Yo. We'll call him. Okay, we'll call him Yo, but his real name is Jonas Saktani. So
Okay. Well, I think that's a really nice tribute to have him definitely included in that story. Thank you for sharing that. That's
absolutely.
really nice. Now, you did touch upon this, and I kind of love this for fantasy. You should see it in some other games and campaigns that I've read through and games that I've played. Culture is so important to me in fantasy stories because it kind of definitely gives you a basis of where this is coming from and gives you that laid down track to say, okay, I understand this is representative of this world, it's representative of that world. Um, and when I read from yours, that a lot of the stuff that you're taking is from this real world culture, as opposed to kind of just trying to make it up off the fly. What was your driver for doing that?
I think that it's well, I'm a history fan. I love history. When I went to college, I started off as a history major. Then I realized that the job market for people with history degrees isn't really big, so I switched to computer science as a practical decision. But my love of history was always there, and in particular, Middle Eastern history. The cradle of civilization. The earliest big nation states. Sumeria and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I think that there's a tendency in old D&D is just kind of throw it all together. And that's what I did in my own campaign. Everything was just all, you didn't really think that much about ethnicities. You just kind of combined names however you wanted to. So when we decided to publish Chaldea, we said, okay, we got to clean this up a little bit. And we have all these kingdoms, and we need to go through each kingdom and say, what's the touchstone? What's the historical place and time? And it's not just about place, but about time. So, like Hesse is rooted in sort of Germanic culture, Rhine Valley, 14th century. British culture, we use sort of just post-Norman invasion. Akkadia, Neo-Babylon, 7th century BC. Ardea, pre-Islamic Arab cultures, or and so on and so forth. We have a Japanese culture that's from the Muromachi period, which is kind of like the feudal high point of what we think of as samurai and
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah, we went through about I think we're probably drawing on about 17 or 18 specific historical cultures, but then we take great liberties. I want to hasten to say we're not trying to duplicate exactly these cultures. They're just a place to kind of pin an idea of what people wear, what sort of naming conventions they use, throw in a few words from time to time from that culture, that accent. Of course, we don't know what accents sounded like really in 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So there we have to kind of use a modern reference points. But I love working with accents.
Yeah. And I think people will understand that when they do see this and get a chance to understand. I like I said, I think it helps you to define, and gives you that basis based on your world to say, okay, I get this in this place point in time, but now we get to see from your perspective what's the rest of this world with these characters and backgrounds and how they handle where they come from. One of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about was the artwork. So for those who haven't seen the post I had got on our website, we did have some sample art that came from, Peter, and these are so beautiful. I can't even say enough, like how gorgeous this art is. So I wanted to kind of briefly touch with you on some of these that I had seen. One of them, I guess it was, is the name of a city was, I think it's Saratov, Saratof, which is, Yep. I mean, when I opened that picture, I was just so blown away. Like, this is gorgeous. So
Oh,
who's,
thank you.
yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that particular city?
Yeah, so Saratov is the capital city of the empire. So Chaldea, when our story begins, Chaldea is ruled by an emperor who's a demigod of Set, who rules the entire world. And it's not really a spoiler to say this guy gets assassinated. We say it in our ads. He pretty much dies right off the bat. And so our story is set in the wake of what happens when you have an emperor who's so powerful, who's a demigod, and he's assassinated. Nobody really knows who did it. So there's a lot of obfuscation about that. And so Saratov was his capital city, and so it's big, it's massive. We have we kind of veer towards an epic style of fantasy, sort of a. I will confess that we were power gamers of D&D back in the 80s.
Who wasn't? Everyone was.
We might have gone past 20th level even, you know. We might have dared to play gods. Yeah, so that's our vision of what a city might look like, who's the capital city of a demigod of Set, who's been ruling it for 40 years.
Okay, that's very. Now, the one thing I did notice is, and I guess let's kind of briefly talk about when it comes to the landscape of Chaldea. Like, I haven't seen a map yet. Every fantasy world, always needs one somewhere. Will fans get to see that at some point, what the actual landscape of the world is?
Absolutely. We have maps, and I think that's a good point. We should have included some maps in the artwork distribution for the press. But yes, we do have maps.
Okay, that's good. So people get to see where these cities relate to other places and where Saratov sits compared to the rest.
Yep.
So one of the other ones we had here was a battle scene that looks like with Sarva, who is going up against orc charioteers.
Yes. So that scene, it shows an early concept of Sarva before we made her a Middle Eastern character.
Okay.
And so we had a lot about the storyline for her before we decided to change her, just to broaden our ethnic basis. And so the orc charioteers are not the run-of-the-mill orcs, but like tough badass orcs who are on charioteers pulled by night steeds, hell steeds that can phase in and out between the prime material plane and other planes. And so the battle scenes with these guys tend to be pretty hectic and like, oh my god, they're over here, oh, they're over here, and that sort of thing. And you notice there's a little dog beside her.
Yeah.
In that piece of art. The dog is named Ripper. And he looks like a pretty, like, doesn't look that tough. He's a terrier, but he is a demon sniffer dog who has special abilities when fighting creatures of the netherworld, like, hell steeds.
Okay, I was going to say, if you've never owned a terrier, they are tough little dogs. So don't underestimate.
We wanted a small dog, but then we chose terrier very specifically for that reason.
Yeah, they are. That's very. The one thing about the art I love about this is the color scheme, that palette of the little bit of the oranges and yellows, and how bright they just pop out of there. I was like, wow, this is really good work. And to touch upon this, since you talk about like orcs are not the standard run-of-the-mill orcs, you did mention that the fantasy, I guess let's use them, races that are in here are not necessarily your standard run-of-the-mill. An elf is just not an elf, a dwarf's just not a dwarf. Do you want to enhance or provide any more details behind that?
Yeah, sure. I would say our elves and our elves are going to be pretty familiar looking to D&D fans. But we base more on Burning Wheel specifically than Dungeons and Dragons. I like that Luke Crane did a lot of more depth of work into these races. The orcs, we inspire our orcs from Roman mythology. We don't know for sure if that's where the word orc came from, but we can use it this way, which is that the orcs were minions of Orcus, who was a Roman god. And so that's kind of our reference point for orcs. And they're definitely subterranean, they're nocturnal, and they were quite some time ago, they were taken over by an evil dragon who has pushed them to be as vile as they are.
Okay. Interesting. I like this. So, besides, your orcs, elves, dwarves, and I think you mentioned with halflings, what other races will we see as part of this story?
Yeah, I think if you could imagine if you were to imagine an old school Dungeons and Dragons campaign with the player character races, if you will, being those you just listed, and
Right.
gnomes, and so on, and then most of our monsters, if you will, or say non less friendly temperamented individuals, like giants and undead
Right.
and the lizard folk and just so on and so forth. I think that the setting will feel pretty familiar. We do have a couple of unique monsters or creatures. We have what's called the Drazzledar. The Drazzledar are like the ultimate guardians. They're like these 20, 30-foot tall dudes. There's like 100 of them. And they formed the core of Cordava's military in the beginning because they're super powerful. So somehow Cordava, the emperor who's recently assassinated, he somehow formed an alliance with this group of creatures, and it was a key part of his power grab to take over the world.
Okay, there you go. And we have about like 100 of these massive creatures. How can you not? So
yeah. And after he took over the world, he stationed them. He has 20 legions. He assigned 2 of the Drazzledar to each legion, and he had 20 of them as his personal bodyguards. And then the rest he put scattered around Chaldea to defend certain interesting places, to either protect something or to keep something from getting out.
Out. Yep.
Right.
Everyone knows those. Everyone knows those stories.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And so when Cordava is assassinated, all of these Drazzledar from all over Chaldea, they somehow know this. It's magic. and they immediately rage into fury and go running towards the capital to protect the emperor even after he's dead.
Okay.
And so there's what we see as sort of one of the classic sort of RPG scenes that you could do in Chaldea is have a situation where a Drazzledar in some random place in Chaldea abandons their post. Well, what were they guarding?
Right.
What were they protecting that is now suddenly without its guardian? And so.
All right. And I'm sure we'll see about that in one of the coming episodes soon. And then the last one was a look here. I guess this was an interesting art piece. It was listed known as the Council of Consuls.
Yes.
Yes. Has a dragon overlooking. And I'm like, okay. So what's the story behind this one?
Okay, yeah. So Emperor Cordava, the one who was recently assassinated, of course, he had to have an administrative body to oversee his empire, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so there's it's loose basically off of a Roman sort of setup with a Senate, and some subset of the senators, which there are hundreds. There's about 20 of them who hold cabinet positions, and they're called the consuls of the empire.
Okay.
And the Council of Consuls is when these 20 or so people get together. So I always like the alliteration, Council of Consuls.
Consuls.
Well, yeah, and one of those consuls happens to be a dragon.
Interesting. Okay. So in your world, which I think, even in D&D, we've always seen it where dragons, they're very sentient, they have personalities, they have, they can talk to people. It's not like they can't, but it's obviously here, one of them holds a reigning position on the Emperor's cabinet.
Well, he's a dragon that refuses to polymorph down into a smaller, convenient size. He's just too arrogant for that, even though he's a powerful sword. He's the Grand Vizier. He's actually the head mage, if you will, of the Empire.
I love it.
This elder dragon of magic. And so the council room has this area above it that he can just fly in and land and hang out up there. And
yeah, it's a very cool picture. That to me, that one it's wall worthy. Get a big print and hang that on your wall. It's a beautiful art. So we've talked about some of these pictures and the moving graphics that you're going to have, but we still haven't talked about yet who's behind all the art here for the World of Chaldea.
Yes. So we use 2 art studios. And so these are studios that are mainly known for their comic book art, and they use a number of artists. And so I'm sometimes in the awkward position. I can't really pinpoint exactly which artist worked on which pieces.
Right.
But the studios are called Studio Volts.
Okay.
They came in with us the earliest and have been with us the longest. And so they've probably done about 70, 80% of the art. And the other studio is called Frog Children. And both of these studios are fantastic, do great art. And of course, that wouldn't, I think the individual that deserves a lot of credit for this is my partner in Chaldea, Steve Connard. He's my co-director of all of our films and motion graphics, and he's also the art director. So he works with the studios, and he does the storyboards because the artwork is pretty complex in terms of what the scenes have to do to support the story.
Right.
And so he works with them on what they should illustrate.
Very cool. Yeah, they're bang down beautiful pieces of art. I'm looking forward to seeing, where the rest of these come out as they're coming through in the video. So question, and I don't remember reading, so where was all the live action filmed?
Yeah, so we're based in Seattle, and we have a place we call Chaldea Studios.
Yeah.
It's a fancy word for a warehouse. And,
that works.
And in fact, I'm there now because I have better internet here than at home. And we have it's a warehouse space, and we build sets here. We have a sound wall. It's not quite as perfectly quiet as a sound studio, but it's quiet enough to do really good sound work. And so we'll build a set here in the studio, and then we'll film it, and then we get rid of it.
That's awesome.
Another one.
All right, that's very cool. It's a do-it-yourself studio. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
It gives you what you need. That's all that matters.
That's right. We did do one film outdoors, and the very first film we did, that's in chapter 3, it's called Toy Soldiers. It's part of the chapter called War Room. That film was the first one we did 6 years ago-ish. And we built the set here in Chaldea Studios, but we didn't have our sound wall yet. So then we disassembled it, took it to Seattle Grip and Lighting, and rebuilt it and filmed it there. But all the other ones we filmed here in our own studio here in West Seattle.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's ask this: what was your biggest challenge going through this as you're, putting together these sets, and especially, with COVID running around all for this year? I'm sure you've had, struggles of not being able to fully always meet with people to do things, and you have to keep safety. So what's been your biggest challenge in getting this running?
Well, as far as COVID related, it hasn't really been an issue for us directly because we had finished all our films, and so we've been in post-production for the last year or so, year and a half. We finished our last film last year sometime. So COVID didn't. So in post-production, as you probably know, is kind of a solitary sort of thing. It's mainly editors working on their computers at home. So it hasn't been an issue. I come to the warehouse, but there's nobody else here. So I think indirectly, the biggest challenge has been that the funding for this project comes from my share of the profits of Gen Con.
Okay.
And Gen Con, of course, is in the category of businesses very hard hit by COVID. So, so my funding temporarily dried up for Chaldea, but we had enough funding to get it released and some marketing for the release. Where it really has impacted us is that we would be working on the next block of episodes,
right?
And that work is not happening because of COVID. So it means there will be a longer gap between this initial launch of 8 chapters and the next launch of 8 chapters, and that's unfortunate. But that's the reality of it. Unfortunately, people don't expect much more than that from indie film producers. So
and that's okay. Maybe that makes them want it more. As these are coming out, be like, well, when's the next one? And it's the anticipation also that builds up. So that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Are you planning to do at least another block of episodes, another season, let's say, per se, right away?
Oh, we're gonna definitely. We have plans to. Bernard, I'm gonna be working on this until I die. Okay, so how far we get depends on how long I live.
Gotcha.
So we're mapping out a big story here that will take. Go big or go home. That's like I like big epic fantasy stories. So this 8 chapters is the beginning of a long, long saga, something that we can all enjoy as we grow old together.
I love it. I love it. So what I did find interesting is that you've from the release of the episode that you have for this first season, you have 8. And it was funny, I was having a conversation with my son today about producing and with TV when they talk about series and how long is a series. Is it 20? Is it 10? Is it 13? And it's like even with recent shows that we've seen, 8 seems to be the magic number, of what's a good series, like, just to keep a good consulate story going. Was there a particular reason why you went with 8 as opposed to doing like 10 or 13?
The reason we went with 8 was because it was half of 16, which is where we started.
Okay. Hey, that's fair. That's a fair answer.
We realized 16, like, slow down, Jackson. 16 is too many.
Even you thought like 8 sounds like 8 was the magic number to work that with.
Yeah, and of course we're going to go way past 16. I mean,
right.
that was just how many we were working on initially at once. So like, we're working on 16 episodes, and then but now the writing is much further than that. But the writing is up into episode 30 or something like that. So
okay, who's primarily doing the writing? Is it you and Steven, or who's handling that?
So Steve Connard is the lead artist, the art director and the lead writer. Okay. So you can tell I'm more the face, I guess. I do some writing. The Sarva story is probably the one closest to me in terms of writing. I wrote the first version of it, but I'm not that great of a screenwriter. I need a lot of work. We also have 2 part-time screenwriters who are like legit Hollywood screenwriters, Steve Schwartzstein and Michelle Takahashi, and they do a lot of polishing on our scripts, and okay. It's kind of a team effort with Steve getting sort of the most work on the scripts, and then these 2, this guy and the gal from LA doing a bunch, and then me meddling a little bit.
Were there things as you were building out this story and the script and such where you had to make a decision to say, like, if one of the screenwriters said, like, I think we should drop this, and you were like, nope, that has to stay? Did you run into any of those?
Daily. Yeah. I mean, it's not, it doesn't do any good though to hire professionals if you're not going to listen to them. Yeah. But there is Steve Schwartzstein and Michelle Takahashi bring a lot of professionalism to a lot of structure and understanding of how a script has to, there's emotional ups and downs. Right. Things have to get resolved. Yep. Things have to be set up, etc. So they're very good at that. Steve Schwartzstein is also likes to write comedy, and so there's while Chaldea is not campy or slapstick, it is good to have a little bit of comic relief from time to time, and so he's really good at adding in that. But then Steve Cotter, my main partner, and we understand fantasy. Right. we understand Chaldea, we understand Dungeons and Dragons, and so everybody brings something to the table, and yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So we know that the first episode is going to release on December the 20th. So that's this coming Sunday on your YouTube channel, which is listed as World of Chaldea. Yep. So please go check this out. I think this is going to be spectacular. I'll be looking forward to seeing the first episode. How long do each episode run? Are we talking about like a 30, 45 minute or so? An hour?
So on Sunday, the 20th, we're launching actually 2 bits. There's a prologue, which is about 15 minutes, and then chapter 1. And so that'll look like 2 chapters, but we think of it as a prologue in chapter 1. And the prologue is about 15 minutes. Chapter 1, I can't remember. It's probably all of our chapters generally land between 30 to 45 minutes. So it's somewhere in there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and they're both set up, by the way, if you go early. They start at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday. They're set up as YouTube premieres, so you can go and basically sign up to be in the premiere. It's all free. All this stuff is free. Everything we're doing is free.
Very cool.
And then you can watch it with us for the first time. Well, not first time for us. But
not for you, right?
we can watch it with you during its first public viewing, and we'll be there in chat.
Awesome.
Stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah. So people just make sure you go and sign up on Sunday. Then don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified when the next episode is coming out. And right? Always have to make sure you be informed and
Yes,
there.
subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you
Yes, that
never
always
miss
helps.
another video.
That always helps. All right. So as you did mention, when I have you here, I want to, briefly touch upon Gen Con talk since, we unfortunately did not have a Gen Con last year. We went virtual, at least not a face-to-face. So I know everyone's looking forward to that. So from what we know, the plan this year is that it looks like we are looking forward to having a face-to-face Gen Con in August. That seems to be the plan to schedule. We did read recently that I guess registration and event submissions are being temporarily just put on hold. It looks like they're trying to just kind of gauge the waters and see where things are based on state, I'm sure, with the state of Indiana and health concerns and such like that. Is there anything else that you were able to inform us on at that point? What's the next plan?
Not really. We're having to wait and see what things look like. We reached the point that we felt comfortable committing to having a show. Of course, I mean, if things go pear-shaped, then that could change too. But
yeah,
we reached a point where we thought, okay, I think we're gonna commit to this August date. We were under a lot of encouragement from the city to plant a flag somewhere,
right?
And but we still don't know exactly what this show is going to look like. What is the level of social distancing that's going to be required? We certainly, almost certainly won't be able to have nearly as many attendees as we would normally. So we've been careful. We're having to wait on things like event registration because we don't know how many events we're going to be able to run. We don't know what level of safety will be required, and that has a big impact. Obviously, imagine 6 people sitting around a table playing a game, and then there's another table and another table and another table.
Oh yeah.
That's the traditional format is pretty dangerous from a COVID perspective. So, are we looking about at having tables outside under a canopy or spread out? Oh, here's hall A, we've got 2 tables in there.
Yeah, and it's not, I mean, it's funny, but it's not. Like, I think, we joked a lot. I could say as a fan, and an attendee, I always joked a lot about, hygiene related things, and when you come to the convention, and you're streaming so many people, and especially in the exhibit halls when you're shoulder to shoulder. And now, unfortunately, with COVID, you kind of look at it again and go, that's maybe not realistic, to be able to do that. And, I can see your group has a large, task at hand to try to figure out how do you manage that. And
I mean, with the extreme case, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but the extreme case is that, maybe the exhibit hall is the entire convention center and all the booths are spread way out and maybe a lot bigger. And maybe there's some restrictions on how many people can go in at once. I mean, it's not, I think almost certainly it's not going to be a typical Gen Con. But it's going to be some wonky thing. And we had to, we felt we needed to commit to the dates, but we're not committing to much more just yet.
Right. and a lot of us as part of the fan, based fans of Gen Con group, at least on Facebook, that I'm a part of too. We were all talking a lot about that, and one of the things that we'd appreciate from your group and your organization is that the fact that you did commit to say our plan is we will do this. I think there was a lot of fear that people would say we're going to cancel, and then when summer rolled around, maybe COVID levels weren't as bad as they think they could have been, and people are like, we probably could have had this. We could have worked with them. So we appreciate the fact that you're committing at least to saying we're going to do this. And even if worst case the state said no, we got to call this off. That's a different story, but at least we can try to move forward. So, so we appreciate that. Thank you for that. All right.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. So once again, let me just remind everyone again, World of Chaldea YouTube starts December 20th, 4 p.m. Pacific time. That'd be 7 p.m. Eastern time for those in the East Coast. Please make sure you go ahead and sign up for the premieres. You get a chance to talk to Peter and Steve as they're in the chat. Go ahead and converse about what you're watching and excitement of this new story. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you once again for taking the time today, and good luck with the premiere. I hope everything goes spectacularly well, and we'll see lots of subscribers on there. And if we get a chance, maybe we'll talk again about as we're going through the episodes and come back for the World of Chaldea and where it goes from there.
Thank you very much. And we're going to have a lot of other content on the playlist. We're going to have, you know, interviews with actors. We're going to have what we call deeper delve series, where we take certain topics and go into like, what the heck are they talking about there? So in addition to the main storyline, there's going to be lots of other Chaldea content to sink your teeth into.
Oh, so we're gonna see the after show, like episode for episode of, you know, what happened on
Yeah, we're gonna have for each of these 8 chapters later in that same week. We're gonna have an interview with the lead actor, or if it's a cast reunion,
Awesome.
a group. And we're also going to have director's commentary tracks, where we'll the week after on the 27th, 28th, we'll re-release the prologue and chapter 1, but with Steve and I yammering about the behind the scenes of making those chapters. So
all right. That sounds that sounds exciting too. I'm looking forward to that. That's very
thank
cool.
you.
All right. Well, Peter, once again, thank you for your time today. I greatly appreciate it. And once again, good luck at the premiere, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you for having me on your show, Bernard. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.